Welcome to Quranomics. I am Qadi Tayyib Azdi, and today's article is titled Rejecting the Doctrine of the Obedience to the Ruler by the writer Sameh Askar. In the doctrine of Salafism and Azharism, obedience to those in authority is a Quranic obligation to the Almighty, saying, "O who you believe, obey God and obey the Messenger and those in authority among you." Chapter An-Nisa, verse 59. So, the mention of obedience came with a single system: God, the Messenger, whom is in charge. So, if those words of God and the Messenger are infallible, so the ruler is infallible. It is a necessity. And I said, obey God and the Messenger are obligatory to ensure unity in it. As for obedience to the ruler, there is a conflict with the text. The verse, "If you quarrel about something," refer to God and the Messenger, meaning that if the dispute of obedience with the guardian is an issue, the Quranic text treats it by returning to God and the Messenger during his lifetime. Then a dispute arose regarding the infallibility of the guardian. Is it for the individual or for the group? As they said, if the guardian fornicates or stole or killed or drank alcohol, is obedience to him obligatory? And does he become infallible here? Note. This is a note. They were preoccupied with the major sins of the ruler. They were preoccupied with the major sins of the ruler, but they were not preoccupied with the conditions between the subjects and the ruler, if he's oppressor or a failure. And this was the reason for the deterioration of the traditional Muslim situation, since they were enablers since the Abbasid era dynasty. So the rulers are either oppressors or failures, while the jurists justify them, protecting their thrones and defending it as a religious obligation, until it was famous that disobeying the ruler was a huge innovation and may reach the point of infidelity for some of them. And when Wahhabism appeared, they described it as Kharijits, exiters or the outsiders or secessionists, for not for their extremism and killing, but because they revolted against the Ottoman Caliphate. This doctrine, obedience to the ruler, did not pay attention to the sharp disagreement about the nature and method of authority of appointing and managing it. The Caliph is either by appointment, by hereditary, or by consensus of the people of the solution and contract, the top special advisors, or shall we say, like in these days, the cabinets or the top high people. Even the method of choosing by people of the solution or the special advisors, they differed in it between consensus of the few and the public, or / the majority. And what if one of the countries rebelled against the caliphate and encouraged others, like a secessionist or that rejected the caliphate or voting for him? Based on that, is the allegiance to the caliph lapsed, null, and void? Or should the rebels be described as outsiders or secessionists, and that is enough? Just disregard them. Then they agreed upon a minimum for the group of the people of solution and contract, the top special advisor, of 5 people to represent, such as those who pledge allegiance to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq in the 2 Sahih. While they did not set a rule for resolving the problem of their consultants' conflict or their differences, the jurist negligence of the conflict of the Shura Council or the people of the top level advisors results in producing after that the doctrine of obedience to the dominant ruler. So they moved up one step from obedience to the ruler to obedience to the dominant ruler, because now there's competition. Because the impotence regarding the appointment of the caliph, he must have a decisive action that corresponds to the requirement of obedience, balance of power, which is security. And after that, be more strict in the command for those who rule, because of psychological concerns with the jurist for fear of chaos or in the advent of an infidel or heretic authority intruding or opposing, even though traditional Muslims' lands are ruled by infidels and innovators according to their classification, either after the fall of the Umayyad state with the installation of the Shiite revolutionaries, or in the second Abbasid era with the emergence of Shiite states, or even after the advent of the Tatars. They treat their opinion according to developments. Therefore, doctrines of obedience to the ruler are generally considered related in special periods of time. And this is what served the jihadists the most, considering that obedience to the ruler of this time is not obligatory, but a reprehensible innovation that leads to the loss of religion. How they tie politics to religion. A reason behind the confusion of the jurists is in obeying the ruler, and their division is the absence of any political vision in Islamic heritage. The two books, Al-Ahkam Al-Sultaniya by Al-Mawardi and Abi Ya'li Al-Farra, can be considered the only ones that included political thought in the form of organized narratives, more or less streamlining the process of choosing the imam and the nature of shura and the people of solution and contract. And as long as they are narratives, then they will not discuss political developments or changes in the world after the Shed incident. The Shed incident, this happened after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And that's a whole different story. That's what the whole debate started from. Because the content of the book, Al-Ahkam Al-Sultaniya, deals only with the methods of choosing the imam in the first 70 years after the death of the messenger. And several schools of thought emerged, including obedience to the victorious ruler, according to Ibn Hanbal and Ibn Umar, and they inferred the latter's position on the Battle of Hurra. He said, "We are with the ones who prevail." In fact, the doctrine of obedience to the ruler does not serve Sunnis at all, but rather serves the Shiites, given that the text on obedience is accompanied by God and the Messenger and the sanctity of this merger of the infallible Imam, which they believe. And this strengthens philosophically the principles of the infallibility of the Imams, which distinguishes the Twelvers' belief in general. And generally, the Shiites benefit from the doctrine of obedience to the ruler, is that they say of individual infallibility for the Imam, and it is an interpretation of the verse that is not mentioned in the Sunnah because of its requirement, which connects to the Imam's infallibility to agree with the Twelvers, the Shiites. That's one sect of the Shiites. And in order to escape from the consequences of this interpretation, some of the opposition from the Sunnah said that infallibility is for the group. And some of them said that infallibility is achieved only in the Imam if he is valid according to the well-known principle of Sunnah. Faith increases with obedience and decreases with disobedience, which is what served the jihadists in the end, after they reached the rule of the Sultan's apostasy and the event of his disobedience. Because the lack of individual faith harms the individual himself or whoever deals with him, as for the ruler, it is his faith that's necessary that leads to the faith of the entire nation. And if this ruler is disobedient, he may destroy the public's faith in religion, resulting with the loss of their private version of Islam. What happened in As-Saqifa and what follows it is the rule to which the Salafis and Al-Azharis resorted to about obedience to the ruler, then the subsequent development of obedience to the dominant ruler according to the Islamic heritage. A dispute occurred between the Hashemites and some of the companions over governance after the death of the Prophet. The messenger and the dispute was between the immigrants on one hand and the helpers on the other, and it almost broke out into a war. And in the Hashemite party, there was another dispute between Abu Bakr with Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's son-in-law and cousin, who was at the center of it, being the cousin of the messenger, and according to Arabic tradition, he was in line to the caliphate, and he was supported by a group politically called Shi'at Ali, the followers of Ali. As we can understand that the now Shia religion originally started as a political party and transformed into a religious sect later. And when Ali saw that stopping this conflict represents a higher interest, so he did not explicitly openly accuse Abu Bakr for taking over the caliphate after he took it from the immigrants, but rather obeyed Abu Bakr as ruler that overtaken it. So the Islamic political jurisprudence stops at this thorny stage, and they built on it all their political perceptions. There is no difference between a Sunni and a Shia. They're all the same. They're just fighting for the chair. The matter even came to say that praying behind the imam is contentment with his guardianship. And an action in its content means voluntary obedience. So if someone overtakes the caliphate and then leads the people in prayer, everyone who prays behind him is obedient to him. That's a concession that, okay, I agree with him. Although this is something different, prayer is devotional while power is worldly. And according to this saying, it means that all opponents of the caliph do not have the right to pray behind him. Therefore, none of them will go to the mosque because they oppose him. Then how is the imam in prayers is the imam of the state? And the Prophet prayed behind Abdurrahman ibn Auf while keeping the difference of leadership of the mosque in prayer and the leadership of the state in ruling. And this is an additional big part in which they differed. But because they are imbued with what happened in the Shed incident, they did not agree on anything. So they opened the door to split even more birth formation of different conflicting groups, each with its own imam. Then it reached a command to call for the killing of the caliph if he was pledged allegiance while there was someone else preceding him. And this is what has been spread afterwards. So there's only one caliph, so if somebody else was elected while the other one was ruling, then he should be killed. That is the jurisprudence of political assassinations that spread in the Abbasid era and was inherited by the Mamluks, spread during the Ottoman era and until today. And the Ottomans even went way further. They were killing, as soon as he was elected, he would kill his own brothers right off the bat. And until today, this has happened. Even if this murdered caliph comes by shura and by the group of Ahl al-Hal wal-Aqd, the solution and contract, alone with no competition, the powerful will take over in a coup. And history books is full of these incidents. You could go look at it. You could go read it too. I mean, so there is no consideration for shura here. And we return again to the jurisprudence of the dominant ruler, which controls the minds of the jurists tightly. And they see obedience to him as not a worldly matter, rather, it is a sacred religious belief. And this is one of the results of justifying what happened in the shed incident, as the companion Abu Bakr as-Siddiq did not obtain the caliphate by consultation and consensus, but by the support of the immigrants, the Qurayshi tribe, and those others who are not from the Ansar, the helpers, the opposition, and the objectors from the Hashemite branch to Ali ibn Abi Talib, as stated in Sahih al-Bukhari as a historical book. Thus, stipulating the Qurayshi lineage in the Caliph came with this, based on what Abu Bakr said, because this is how he took over with this one made-up hadith. This matter is in this area of Quraysh. That means in this lineage or this block of Quraysh. Just as Quraysh ruled in the two Umayyad and the Abbasid era, it is obligatory that it governs forever because of a supreme virtue by choosing it as a center for the message and honoring them with Islam, even though the mind immediately declares that the Prophet's message to Quraysh means their corruption and not their righteousness. That's why he was sent in the first place. As it is an allusion to claim credit and honor for the tribe, and because of this severity of its spread, the principle, they have narrated the hadith of the 12 Imams of Quraysh, which created a crisis after that, as some considered the hadith of the Qurayshi Imams serving the Shiites' doctrine and not the Sunnah. So they resorted to interpreting the hadith, considering that the tenure of these Imams had expired in the Umayyad period. Finally, the doctrine of obedience to the guardians is a reflection of a crisis of politics that took place at the beginning, converting it from true Islam upon the death of Prophet, turning it into a worldly Arabic tradition Islam. And due to the strong tradition of the jurists, they said it in addition to attending the benefit factor that may lead to the fiqh to issue fatwas that they do not believe in, as happened with Al-Hasan al-Basri, who was narrated from him in recognition of the fatwa against his will for fear of an unjust Umayyad Sultan, or even out of a belief in special interest between the jurist and the Sultan. So all the Sultan or the Caliph need was a mouthpiece. And they forced him, Hassan al-Basri, to speak it and say it as, because if he spoke it, it's legitimate. So even though it was against his will or his opinion, he said it out of fear for his life. Now, claims were formulated after al-Mutawakkil al-Abbasi's persecution of the people of opinion. Then after him, the persecution of Al-Qadir by Allah for everyone except for Al-Ash'ari and Maturidi sects and denomination. For political representation of the jurists means the presence of an interest to some of them and each other and the absence of others, which means that any fatwa or religious ruling issued by the jurist at that time would not represent the religion. Rather, he, the Caliph, would represent the jurist himself as an instrument of authority, not the conscience of the public. So you can see how this is all evolved from, all this is just basically fighting for the rule, fighting for the chair. It started out with the shed incident between the immigrants and the Qurayshi, and so the Qurayshi took over by virtue of a single hadith and the support of the immigrants. So the helpers were out, and then between them, the Quraysh, there was a fight between Ali and Abu Bakr, which the supporters of Ali say that he deserves the ruling because he's the Prophet's son-in-law and cousin. So, but then Abu Bakr took it because people had some type of animosity against Ali, so he did not get it. He got it the fourth one, way over. And based on hadiths and based on the mistranslation of the verse of the Quran, they just translated to solidify their ruling. So it started off obey the ruler, obey the dominant ruler, then obey, and then it started the killing. And what if second one came out? And it's until now, history books are full. So this is just a small picture that is basically mixing religion with politics. It ruins and corrupts everything. So this is to the end of that. And I am Caliph SD. This is Chronomics. Thank you for following, and we'll see you again.